It is 6:30. I will call this meeting to order and I'll ask the clerk to take the roll call, please.
Mayor Patterson,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Warren Dickert,
Present.
Councillor Harold Fleet,
Present.
Councillor Dave Hawkins sends his regrets, Councillor Carol Hudson,
Present.
Councillor Brandon Cable,
Present.
Councillor Susan Sackle.
Present. Thank you. All members, with the exception of Councillor Hawking, are present. I'll begin with the land acknowledgement. As we work toward reconciliation with Indigenous people, we begin our meeting today by respectfully acknowledging that we are situated on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of Three Fires, known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. Welcome to our special meeting for Monday, March the 17th, 2025. Good afternoon, council, staff, guests, the viewing public, and the media. Council, does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest or a conflict of interest? Of course, if one should arise during the meeting, you may declare it then. So item 4 is agenda additions or deletions. So I am going to ask that we move our closed meeting to now. So we have that information. And I need a motion. Let me get this straight. We're going to meet to, we need a motion to suspend the rules of procedure to alter the order of the agenda, and we need a 2/3 vote. So I need a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Cable and Councillor Hudson, all in favor? That is carried. So that allows us to move the closed meeting to now. And I would ask that for a mover and a seconder, for us to go into closed session to address a matter pertaining to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege with respect to a leased property agreement. I need a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Sackle and Councillor Fleet. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we'll just give Tanya a minute to do her thing, and I'll ask if you could leave until. Okay, we are back in open session, and I declare we only discussed the items that were listed on the closed meeting agenda. So we are in our special council meeting. Moving on, we have a staff report, and we have report ED 0425. It is the Youth Retention Focus Group results. And it is from April Marshall, our Economic Development Manager, and I need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor before April highlights. Councillor Sackle, Councillor Cable. April?
Thank you, Your Worship. We're going to stand up for this. I just put together a bit of a presentation to follow us through the report. So we'll get started on that. So you can go to the next slide, Tanya, please. So this is in response to the Youth Retention Focus Group results. So what we did is we held a focus group earlier this month, and we had a successful participation. We had 36 participants, including 7 teenage youth, and we had representation from various stakeholders. This included area schools, workforce development initiatives, upper tier government, previous Launchpad instructors, board members, and participants, as well as other youth programs, religious institutes, and citizens at large. Next, this was all in response to the directive we received at the February 3rd meeting that council directed staff to investigate options in consultation with local youth to develop a strategy that encompasses services or initiatives for youth support with respect to retention and skills and workforce development. So we had 2 focus groups times during that day, so people could attend at their convenience. And this word cloud represents the feeling words that we received from participants. So when people came in to our focus group, we asked them a word that they were feeling upon entering, and then we asked them how they were feeling upon exiting the meeting. So you can see some of the words that rose to the top here: curious, optimistic, hopeful, excited, grateful, intrigued, invested. So I just, we wanted to share that with you because it was really great sessions. There was a lot of great positive energy happening at them. And just personally, I really appreciated the opportunity to connect with community at that development level, community development level, and hear directly from our stakeholders. So next slide, thank you. So just entering the focus group, we decided to use a conversation cafe facilitated process. So it just helps people feel at ease. It gives everyone the opportunity to speak or just sit back and listen if they wished. We set the tone for the focus groups by identifying some definitions, just so everybody was on the same page. So for example, youth, we're talking about people between the ages of 12 to 29 years of age. And this age group includes adolescents and young adults. When we talk about retention, community retention is the practice of keeping members engaged and involved in a community over time. And it's a key part of building a sustainable community. When we talk about skills development, the process of improving specific skills to be more efficient and effective when you perform a task. Soft skills are also thought often as people skills. So this includes good communication and interpersonal skills, leadership, problem solving, work ethic, time management, and teamwork. Workforce development is what we use to describe equipping individuals with the necessary tools, knowledge, and training to meet current and future job demands. Strategies is a way of us to focus our efforts to achieve goals and how we will succeed. So our conversation cafe, we had 4 tables, and the tables were set up to various conversations. So the first one being a values conversation. We wanted to know from our participants what youth feel that they want to feel valued in our community. And we provided some questions as idea starters to start those conversations, which are included in the report. The skill development conversation. This is where we wanted to talk about what skills are important for us to support youth in development, youth development, and how can we support our employers and prepare our future workforce. The youth space conversation. We wanted to know what the importance of physical space and other big ideas that people had. And then we had a youth conversation table. So we wanted to hear directly from youth about what is most important to them and their big ideas. So we had our youth attend the evening session. So through the day, the youth conversation, the adults that were participating were just asked to put their youth hats on and just speak to what they maybe have heard from youth or what they have experienced with youth. So just moving into the discussion, the following, sorry, next slide, Tanya. Sorry, next slide. Oh, I spoke way too far ahead of this presentation. I'm sorry. Next slide, please. This is, okay. So this is, sorry, Tanya, sorry, can you go back 1 slide? Thank you. Okay, so this is going to wrap up the overview of what we heard at each table. So as far as values conversation goes, what we heard at that table was voice and inclusion. Youth want their voices heard, understood, and supported without judgment. They seek engagement, inclusion in community activities, and mentorship. We heard that information and opportunities make them feel valued. Access to information about community opportunities, job experiences, and development programs is crucial. Community involvement. Youth desire involvement in community groups, advisory councils, and events. They value being part of decision-making processes and having platforms to voice their opinions. Support and empowerment. Emotional support, mental health resources, and mentorship are important. Youth want to feel empowered and trusted. At the skills development conversation table, The important skills for youth development we heard about are soft skills, so that communication, teamwork, critical thinking, problem solving, and time management. Technical skills, so trades, your welding, mechanical, woodworking as examples, IT, and financial literacy. Job readiness is an important skill, opportunities for co-op placements, job shadowing, summer jobs, and volunteering. And we also heard that entrepreneurship is a skill that they would like to learn more about. And that's support for young entrepreneurs and connections with employers for skill development. At the, next slide, thank you. At the youth space conversation, the importance of physical space. We heard about safe and inclusive spaces. Youth would like that space, that safe, neutral spaces away from typical student locations like schools. They would like the space to be designed with youth input and offer a variety of programming. Community hubs, they like central, accessible locations that provide structured and open programming, including skills development and social activities. Collaboration, multiple organizations with similar mandates could co-manage these spaces to support youth effectively. At the youth input table, so this is where we're summarizing the key themes from the youth only input. I actually had the privilege of facilitating that conversation, and it was very inspiring. And I was just the awareness that our youth have in our community, and to hear their perception of how they see things, it was just really enlightening for me to hear that firsthand. So we talked about some of their likes. So outdoor activities, they noted our hiking trails and the variety of places to go is what they like about Hanover. They love how many small businesses we have. They find that there's good starter jobs in this area. Community spaces, they have positive feedback on spaces like the movie theater and dance studios. Some of their dislikes are limited higher education opportunities. So they feel like there are not enough higher education options available locally. Safety concerns came out pretty loud and clear. There's concerns about the perception of drug addicts on the streets or safety when out at night. And lack of dedicated youth space. They feel that there's a need for more emotional and physical spaces for dedicated to youth. And I would just further explain that a little bit. It's my understanding that without feeling like there's a place to go right now, you'll often find them hanging out at McDonald's or even just walking around retail stores in the aisles, especially when it's cold, just trying to get indoors. And then they're often, this is what I was told, that they're often sometimes looked at like they're up to suspicious activity or things of that nature. So they really promoted having a safe space to go to. Training and skills development. They talked about trades and arts. They have interest in trades and arts, including sculpting, pottery, sciences, fashion, tech, and cooking. Life skills. They have a desire for training life skills such as budgeting, cooking, and nutrition. Career exploration. They want to learn more about the career exploration beyond what our existing employers are offering. So there are many more jobs that they notice as career options that maybe aren't necessarily available here. So they want to learn more about what is available. Communication, effective communication. They have preference for communication through Instagram, school announcements, and dedicated calendars. Youth involvement, they would like more involvement in community and student council. That is something that they desire. As far as spaces go, they like safe and accessible spaces. They need for safe spaces that are open more than once a week and accessible on weekends. Just speaking to it. Example that was given to me that I just shared with you. Drop-in options. They highlighted the importance of drop-in spaces where youth can hang out and feel welcome without that pressure of feeling like they need to participate in a program or an activity at that time. Mentorship and support. Youth value mentorship and advice outside of their parents. And inclusivity. need for more involvement and community awareness to promote equality and safe spaces. Social and recreational activities, so social opportunities. They have interest in social activities like theme nights, trivia, and entrepreneurship opportunities. And they have a desire for spaces that support diversity and common interests. And again, safety coming up, just safety concerns with, maybe casual use of racial slurs being used in public. They're noting some of this stuff. Mental health, the need for emotional support and safe spaces to speak up without judgment. And then a community engagement they really support the idea of like a youth advisory council or an opportunity for youth, to be given a budget and some decision-making authority so that they can implement some of these activities or changes in our community. And we had positive feedback on volunteer opportunities that align with their interests. So next slide, please, Tanya. Yeah, here we go. So challenges, opportunities, and recommendations. So the following are some of the challenges, opportunities, and initial recommendations that can be derived from the feedback received and highlight the importance of creating supportive, inclusive, and engaging environments for youth in Hanover. So noting some of the challenges and opportunities, housing and transportation, having affordable housing and transportation to education and job opportunities are significant concerns. Community connection, youth want to feel connected and valued in their community. They seek opportunities to engage with like-minded peers and mentors. Communication, again, noting the effective communication through social media, direct engagement, being those essential outlets to communicate with youth. As far as recommendations go, youth advisory councils has definitely risen as a theme. Like establishing an advisory council to involve youth in decision-making and provide them with budgets and responsibilities. Events and activities, organize more youth-centric events, including dances, festivals, and job fairs. Support systems, enhance support systems for mental health, mentorship, and skill development. And recommendations for new spaces is to put a focus on entrepreneurship, so we can promote that as a career path and also facilitate activities that support those youth business initiatives. I would note too, the Saugeen Student Startup Program came up a few times that evening as well as a successful program. So that was great to hear that feedback. Homework help, they would like to be provided informal homework help and spaces for talking and socializing. And art development really came out too, having that creative space for young people to create and show their works. So in summary, the importance of a dedicated physical space for youth in Hanover rose as a key theme to address their needs, enhance community connection, and support their development. Goals of the space communicated will provide a safe, inclusive, and engaging environment where youth can thrive, ultimately benefiting the entire community. So looking ahead, we're just looking for council's input just based off our findings from the focus groups, just to help staff with further input and direction as far as like what the municipality's role is in these identified recommendations. What the desire is to operate a physical space and how that will be funded, and I'm not saying it has to be that space, but even, dedicating space within the existing facilities, like those are options that we could look at. And prioritizing work for staff, just like what departments maybe should focus on what initiatives that we identify, and also identifying internal partnership opportunities. So there are no financial implications associated with this report, and it links to our strategic plan as far as a healthy and welcoming community, strong environment economy. And the recommendation is that report ED 0425 Youth Retention Focus Group results be received, and the council provides staff with further input and direction as it relates to the development of a youth retention plan with a focus on skill and workforce development. Thank you.
So council, I just want to add to that before we seek your input. So first I want to thank April. She's been crucial through this process. Again, we were giving your direction on February 3rd, and we were able to execute very successful focus groups within 5 weeks approximately, with good attendance and great input, as you can see by the report before you this evening. With the intent of tonight, and we were very upfront at those meetings that council would be having their own opportunity for input. You know, we're very aware of the legislation that we have to follow to get your input and further the business of the municipality, and hence why we're having this special meeting tonight. But thirdly, your direction tonight initially is really key to April and I as we take next steps. Because really there is not, we need to know where your thoughts are with the items that are noted in I. And the reason for that is we don't wish to go down a path that isn't within your thinking at this point in time. You know, obviously, we want to focus our energies on ensuring that the next report that comes back to council with respect to firm recommendations and action is in line with what your initial thoughts are. Otherwise, it's not effective use. I'll be quite frank, it's not effective use of our time. And so we wish to ensure that we get your initial thoughts based on those items so that we can then further the recommendations accordingly from tonight.
Thank you. Thanks to all involved in putting this together. I know it's difficult getting people to attend those focus groups and meetings and trying to get the information out of everybody, but you did very well. Okay, discussion, comments. Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Sherry and April, for this initial report outlining key themes from the focus group sessions that were held a couple of weeks ago. As we consider next steps, I would certainly encourage us to continue gathering additional youth feedback before ideas are implemented, perhaps going into schools to speak and gather feedback on a larger scale. I think the feedback will ensure that programs and initiatives align with the needs of a broad range of youth, and will hopefully encourage greater youth participation in whatever is decided and comes out of these sessions. When I look at the input gathered, and certainly April provided a good summary, certainly I hear a desire for youth to have a voice in the community, the example of a youth advisory council and different communication channels specifically catered to youth. There's a desire for social opportunities and activities, a desire for a safe space that is open regularly, including weekends, and a desire for skills development, perhaps more broadly than what was previously offered at Launchpad, but things like mentorships, entrepreneurship, the arts, career exploration. I do appreciate the note about a physical space being co-managed and the idea of collaborating under one roof. I think that would be a really interesting idea to explore and to consider how we might bring youth services together to support youth within the town of Hanover. I would encourage staff to further investigate partnership opportunities that would benefit this work. And I would also be interested in receiving more information, particularly around the establishment of a youth advisory council, perhaps looking at examples from other communities and perhaps what the core mandate of such a group might be. We might also want to revisit the PlayWorks youth-friendly community program, which Hanover was previously recognized as gold status in 2013, and look at some of the benchmarks that could help us to identify gaps and next steps to support youth within the town of Hanover.
Thank you. Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, April, and thank you to all the focus groups and the youth that were involved. Youth retention is a very important issue to our community. I support whatever we can do to retain our young people. With today's economical environment that includes tariffs and economic uncertainty like we've never experienced, it is presenting a bigger challenges than ever before. I think we need to reach out to our existing businesses to see how tariffs are going to affect them. Are we going to lose companies? Are we going to see layoffs? It's the unknown. We have to have job opportunities in our community that are of interest to our youth. And without those job opportunities, we're going to lose our youth. So I think there are some challenges ahead of us. And I think that we need to look at all the different issues that could affect our youth and so we can retain our youth.
Thank you. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. The Youth Advisory Council, I think that's a great addition. I think, if we can have that as a resource for us to listen and learn from, I think that's a great starting point. And I'm looking around the table. Did we have a youth council member at one point in time? What happened? Where did that go? What, we're not able to fill that role, or what happened?
So my understanding, because I sat in a different chair at that time, was I think we had one school term. James Stockavaz, I believe, was the youth council member. And then it's my understanding that we didn't have any interested applicants who submitted interest after that point. And I believe the opportunity was put out to both Sacred Heart and John Diefenbaker accordingly. So and then COVID hit, unfortunately, which meant we were virtual for all those meetings, because the counselor used to come and sit. I want to say he sat over between where Carol and Counselor Hudson and Counselor Cable were to get that experience as well. So, and it has never, whether it resumed or ceased, I can't recall.
So similar to an exit interview when James was finished, he said the actual role was very heavy along with school and working, to read these packages and understand them and try and, give input. He felt it was very difficult. So he ended up, I think he was on 2 committees. I believe he sat on the library and PRC. Don't quote me on that, but he felt that was easier to integrate into things. But the actual council table was pretty difficult with what goes on at school and extracurricular activities, your own family life, the whole everything. Because you got to remember, as much as we have difficulty understanding some of these reports and acronyms, there's a lot to learn if you haven't sat through any of it. So I would suggest, if we want to try that again, that we work on the committee level. That might be of interest to some youth, and Parks and Rec might be the one when April said trails and what the community has to offer, if we're going to go that direction. So
I believe it must have been pre-2018, because it hasn't existed as long as I've been on council. My first term was 2018. So it must have been prior to that point in time. But I think it's a valuable resource for us to have youth members of, whether it's this council table, and I understand that's quite an ask for a youth to spend the time that it would take to be here. But if we could have them involved in, whether it be Parks and Rec or even perhaps their own committee of some type, I don't know, just that's dedicated to them, so there's not so much peripheral stuff to be concerned with. They could deal with what the youth are concerned about, and then that could come to us, and we would be much better advised at that point in time. So I like that concept. I do have, and I'm not sitting in those sessions, I maybe struggle with needing that separate physical space. I'm just not, I just need to understand that better. What is it they're looking for? we have a facility in town, the deck, which operates. Is it something other than that? I'm just not clear as to what that really involves.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. I think there's definitely a great opportunity and participation with youth groups, and also the DEC, which is a Youth for Christ organization. But what was communicated to me was that perhaps they would prefer a space that didn't have that religious connotation associated with it. And the other idea being, just as I mentioned, right now they're, hanging out in parks or at the restaurants or in stores. So, or the P&H Center, walking around the P&H Center, right? So, but then they're not feeling like they're welcomed or included. So what it was communicated to me was if there's a dedicated youth space with some structure, but not a lot of structure, so that they could be themselves and be with like-minded youth and or mentors, that was much more appealing to them.
So not so much design programs as a space. That's the desire.
Yeah, actually, I will quote one comment that was made was you invite them to the space and then the programming follows. So they get that comfort level, they're part of the space, they feel welcome there. And then as you start to offer more programming and initiatives, they're more apt to participate.
Just if I can augment, and April did a really great job there. That was the table, the space table was the one that I had the privilege of facilitating that conversation. And there was lots of great information. And the key takeaway for me was that A, it needs to be safe and accessible. B, it doesn't need to be just a dedicated youth facility, but space of some sort that they feel welcomed and inclusive and safe and all of those types of things. April certainly highlighted the input that was very clear that it needed to be a space outside of the school and not have faith ties to it specifically. And the deck does wonderful programming in our community accordingly. So those were the things that we heard. And you know, we talk about the P&H Center because that's the facility obviously that the town operates and we're most familiar with. And you know, you only need to go to a Barons game on a Friday night to see that that's essentially like a youth center on a Friday night for the kids that go to the P&H Center. Probably a lot of the young people that go to a Barons game are not there to watch the Barons play hockey, quite honestly, as much as that might disappoint the Barons organization to hear that. That's not the reason that they go there. And having worked in that facility for a number of years, you know, I would listen to staff and, you know, we're just babysitters here. And I don't discredit our staff's comments because sometimes we were. And, you know, as long as youth are respectful when they're in the facility, then they're welcome to be in any facility, whether it's a restaurant or the P&H Center. But I think it's, again, being respectful and having that space where they feel safe and inclusive and all those types of things. I encourage you when you're at the P&H Center the next time, look at the sign on the door going up to the second level, kind of I guess it'd be the west door in behind the concession booth, where you'd go up to the second level, you look out to 7th Avenue and you come out at the Lion's Den. I believe there's a sign on that door that says this stairwell is closed during Barons games. And the reason for that is, unfortunately, some of the young people who were not there to watch the hockey game ended up hanging out in the stairwell and not doing things that they should be doing. So our way as staff to help mitigate that is to close that stairwell accordingly and encourage them to spaces that they're maybe a little more visible, such as the lobby or where have you, so that we can manage that behavior accordingly. But again, the space piece was about having some space that they felt safe and accessible and not watched perhaps, but with some parameters accordingly. There'd have to be staff supervision of some sort.
So I think we should, if we look at that item I, does the municipality have a role in the identified recommendations? Are we here to provide a service to our youth? Councillor Sacco.
I'd say absolutely. They're part of our municipality. We have to do something for them. And so my thought was, I like what Councillor Cable said about going into the high schools, talking to the students, seeing who might be interested in sitting on a council, asking the student councils in those 2 high schools if they would like to be part of a committee, having a staff member from the town represent, help organize, and help them come up with ideas and plans and make a report to council. Don't make them part of council. Ask them simply to come and give a report like we do from the fire department or the police department. So that they don't have too much weight on them as we do as counselors for package meetings. I think we need to operate some kind of physical space or offer some kind of physical space. I don't know how that's going to be funded. I don't know if it has to be, if it was a room that we were giving them in the P&H Center, perhaps we wouldn't have a cost involved necessarily if we wanted to hold back on that. But I would like to see some partnership opportunities coming forward as well for the youth.
Counselor Hudson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to know a little bit more about the Playworks opportunity that happened previous to Launchpad, because I'm not familiar with that, but it sounds to me like it was perhaps the jumping off point for Launchpad following that. Does anybody know anything about that?
So interestingly enough, I was just Googling Playworks again because I have not heard anything about youth-friendly designation for quite some time. And I'm not even sure the Playworks committee, I'm trying to think if Playworks was part of Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, and I'm trying to refresh my memory. All I brought up was past stuff. So because it was a subsidiary, Playworks was an actual organization, and Brandon, I know you were involved when you were involved in the Youth Roots stuff with that, but I can't find anything recent, so we'd have to see if it even exists in its current format or what it looks like now, and find out more information about that. But it was more of a, it's kind of like the age-friendly stuff. It had certain things you had to rank and provide information that indicated your community had those things, and then you either a gold, a platinum, or whatever rating. It was more of an assessment, if I can call it that, from a youth-friendly perspective. I just don't know if they exist anymore.
And did they have programming and things to rate? Oh, okay.
It was truly an assessment tool that, if accepted by Playworks, you received the designation accordingly, and then you had to maintain that and report accordingly. I haven't heard much about them lately.
And I think the idea with the student council, maybe we need to go to them. Instead of having them come here, maybe we need to go there whenever they have their meetings and say, can we give you a report? What's happening in town, you know? So, all right, I'm still looking under this item. Desire to operate a physical space and how will that be funded? I think we could investigate that. If we have stakeholders that want to show support, indicate to us that they might be interested, we can investigate that. If we're going to provide the service, who can we work with? And prioritizing work for staff and by who and what departments right off the top, Parks and Rec and Culture and the library. I see the library with the homework part and tutors. And chime in here. Counselor Hudson.
So if you're going that direction, is it a possibility to use the community hall, which is attached, as a safe space? Because you do have a kitchen facility there, et cetera. And then it can be monitored as well as being open longer hours. They're open in, well, we're in winter hours now, but I think summer library hours are a little later, and at least one day on the weekend.
So that's something else that can be looked into. And we've already identified partners. There might be lots more out there. Any other discussion? Deputy Mayor.
One of the themes that I saw coming up through that, through the report was communications. Can you help me again better understand what it is they are looking for when it comes to the communication side? Like, You said Instagram, and I think we use Instagram from a town's social media perspective now. But what else are they looking for? Can you expand on that a bit?
I think it's the language we use. I think right now our posts are tailored to the general public. I think what youth are telling us is to communicate to them. It's the types of posts and the language and the way we communicate being dedicated to youth. I brought up the idea of like having a dedicated calendar. So all youth events are just posted on that calendar, and they seem to be really responsive to that idea. So I think it's just taking our communication, like just that extra step, so that we're tailoring like more so who we're speaking to versus having it be so broad. It might not even, sorry, if I could just elaborate, like it might not even be just general updates about what's happening at the municipality, right? Like it can be different, like, did you know this or that, or this offers this for youth, and just, like this type of business offers this for youth and they're open, we're not really doing that specific messaging at this point. It's just it's very broad. It's municipal updates, it's community events, but we're not speaking directly to the youth. And I think that is supported in the comment about events specifically for you. Like we have events happening here, but maybe at this point, they're not seeming like they're dedicated to youth, apart from like the Easter egg hunt and things like that. But I'm more, that the adolescent youth and what our events are offering them.
I just, as far as youth, I think we look at the Family Day event that we just had and how successful that was. I look at the Trick or Treat Trail and how many, but we're talking a different demographic there. We're talking, much younger than this. I don't know how to say this politically correctly, but they can sometimes tend to be harder to communicate with. The younger ones that are going to the Trick or Treat Trail and the Family Day, they're there with their parents. They're being brought there versus having to entice them to come out and give them a space that appeals to them and something they, I guess, feel belonging to or whatever. So, I see that. I don't have an answer for that because they're struggling with a lot of things at that age as to what they're trying to accomplish, where they want to go and all of that. So how you design a program that appeals to them, they feel safe in, they talk about emotional support and a lot of the information that you've supplied for us here. That's kind of a specialized field, and we can't just do that with staff. I think you need some specialized help to do that, and I'm not sure how a municipality fits into that. So there's a lot of information here. I'm still kind of trying to digest as well, but the communication piece, I know we've talked about communication is a big task for staff. That's a topic we've had in the past, and perhaps, as we look at some of the plans that we've got, that will improve if we have some of that assistance.
That position for a communications manager we're getting a big job description already for it. So I can see that we are trained as municipal representatives to only speak almost a certain way so that we don't give the wrong information out or the wrong image or appearance of what's happening in town or what's going on. Whereas the youth just, hey, what's happening on the corner, right? We want to be able to say, this is it, this is when it's starting, this is when it's completed. So when did we get old? Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the more that I hear about these different comments, I just keep thinking that it'd be really great if perhaps the idea that Youth Advisory Council were to be established, and then some of these ideas could be fleshed out through that group. I'm thinking even the way that we communicate, I don't know if any of us are really going to be the right person to do that. I could see us ending up having this council, which, to be frankly honest, I don't know if it's going to work if it's voluntary. I think that it would be great if per diems were offered based on attendance of some sort. Like, I think that you're going to have to think about how you're structuring that committee if you want, certain outcomes to be achieved. And then at some point, would we be able to have a youth communications officer who part of their role on the committee is to assist with, communicating, and perhaps they, would get mentorship from April, who would be able to assist them in that piece. But I do wonder if it's, an opportunity for us to look at establishing this youth advisory committee. And I know that we only have a year and a bit left in the council term, but perhaps it's a 1-year pilot that we'd be able to start and try to get off the ground and see what happens from there. Like, I think even if we talk about youth programs and youth dances and youth different activities, I think unless we have the youth that are helping to drive these and helping to spread the word in the schools, like, it's not going to work if we go and say we're going to hold a youth dance at the P&H Center on Friday night, right? But if you can actually get the youth involved in the planning and the recruiting, I think that's how it's going to work.
Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was thinking about dances as well, but I've been going to back porch events for quite a few concerts now. And I think, okay, that's my target audience or people older than me. But honestly, is there something out there for teenagers? Something out there for young adults that we could be bringing those shows here? I don't know if Dave Schefter could find something like that through he does tribute bands mostly, but is there something available that we could be bringing to town? That might be a way to start it all off. It's just brainstorming thought.
Okay, so I think have we given staff direction that we want to provide a service for our youth, provide the opportunities, assist them with skills development, learning. Safe space is the big one.
I would say you've provided some good comments. I'm hearing the Youth Advisory Council, perhaps some consensus around the table about that. And I tend to agree that we get their input. The other things may come to light accordingly. One of the things, and it's noted in here, is prioritizing work for staff. And April and I have had this very conversation, and specifically about a youth advisory council. And if the youth advisory council takes on and provides input that they wish to assist with things like skills and workforce development, then we know that that falls with economic development. If a youth council's input is, we want to provide social activities and recreational type activities, then that doesn't fit with economic development. That fits with parks, recreation, and culture. As you know, through the budget process, our departments have their objectives and goals established for 2025, and we would have to have some conversations with some of our partners, not partners, but department staff, such as Parks, Recreation, and Culture, library's been mentioned, and get their input on, is this something we can add to your job tasks, and what will come off accordingly. We've talked about potential partners. Maybe there are other organizational partners that could assist and fulfill some of that as well. But until we have those conversations, we won't know that specifically. But I think your input with respect to getting more youth input and that youth activity council is certainly what's come through for me this evening. And we can follow up accordingly with some of those other pieces. And I don't know through you, Mayor, if April has anything she wants to add to that based on input provided.
I'd like to say if we investigate further with partners and stakeholders, get a little more concrete input from them to see if they would be interested if we're using safe space, some of our facilities, what we can do. Yes.
And can we include the library in that? Because I think they're a good partner.
Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, it's got to start with the youth because we need the youth there. We talked about a dance. We talked about Dave Schefter running a show. I think the youth involvement has to be there and show their interests if we're going to go forward, because as a businessman like Dave Schefter with Back Porch Productions, he's putting out money to run these programs and these shows, and he's got to pay for that cost of that entertainment. And I think it's very important that the youth is there, and they don't want Councillor Harold Fleet standing there to dance when they're young youth. I think that's what's really important going forward, and that's the beginning because we got to retain our youth or our town's going to grow old very quickly. So thank you.
I just had a visual there. April?
If I could just add to that as well, I just wanted to share another thought that came to me when I was through that experience, and just that I think I totally agree with what everybody's saying in this, and it coming from youth and youth being part of that, the planning and implementation. I think we will have great success from that. But I also want to note that when we invest in our youth in hopes to retain them or for them to come back when it's that time in their life, when they're, you know, establishing their career and their families, it's the feeling that we left with them and the investment we made that isn't necessarily measurable or trackable. I really learned that going through there, because we always struggled with Launchpad and telling, everybody wanted to know all the stories. And, you know, sometimes those stories are there and they're great to share, but a lot of the time the youth aren't really necessarily sharing the impacts of how people touch their lives, or even recognizing maybe that we invested in them directly and that was important to them. But a few years later, it comes out because there was a few examples from some of our youth that they remember certain situations at Launchpad that really touched their lives, you know, and it's really hard to communicate that to our general public and our residents, because that's private for them and they might not even be able to recognize that right now. So I just want to leave that with you guys, with council as well, because that's a moment that I had a realization that we want to track and we want to report on numbers and we want to share these stories to our community and our ratepayers as we should. But at the same time, these are really personal stories and connections that aren't always tangible or that can't be shared as widely as maybe we'd hope to. So just wanted to leave you with that.
Very good. Okay, so you have direction, and I'm not going to put it into words. Maybe Vicky will, or we'll just say, yes, we're in agreement and vote on it. How's that? Just being like the youth, right? Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Very good. All right, so we only have one. Oh, I need to ask if there are any notices of motion with this special meeting. None, and we've had our closed meeting, so we have one final motion, and that is to adjourn at 8:04. I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Cable and Councillor Hudson, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much.